Hello and welcome to Forward Boldly. I'm your host, Christine Niles. It is a mad world that we live in today. And when I say mad, I don't mean angry necessarily. I mean insane. The lunatics are running the asylum. And one of the biggest manifestations of this is all the gender-bending confusion of today. I mean, have you noticed just in the past decade how fast things have progressed? I mean, we went from the legalization of gay marriage back in 2015, and before you know it, now it's open promotion of pedophilia. No, that's not even a decade. A recent video on Twitter that was making the rounds actually made a really good point that I had never thought about. This fellow was talking about how when people uninvited introduce themselves and then make clear what their pronouns are, because that's how they want to be referred to, he makes the point that it makes no sense to tell a person directly, these are my pronouns, whether it's they, zim, zir, whatever nonsense they have today. Because when you're directly addressing someone, you always refer to them as you. You always refer to them in the second person. So it's, hello, how are you? How are you doing? You don't say, how are she doing? That makes no sense. You say, how are you doing? So let's take a look at the point that he has to make.
So when you, quite uninvited, declare your pronouns to me, in spite of what you might say, you are not telling me how to address you. You are not telling me how you like to be spoken to. What you're telling me is how I must think about you and how I must speak to everyone else in the world when I refer to you. You might think it's okay to control me in that way. You may think that you have a good justification for doing so. But at the very least, let's be honest about what you're doing, because that's how I like to be spoken to.
He makes a great point, and case in point, you can look at this video here from Libs of TikTok. If you're on Twitter at all, social media at all, which I don't necessarily recommend, but if you are on Twitter, you should follow Libs of TikTok. This is an account that has been banned multiple times before Elon Musk, and it was restored. But all it does is it just posts clips from TikTok from loony leftists. There's no commentary. There's no editing. It's just, here's another loony TikTok video from one of these leftists. And it shows just how crazy this thinking is. And for that reason, because it embarrasses the leftists, they've gone after this site. Here's one Libs of TikTok video showing a woman, because clearly she's a woman, regardless of what she wants to call herself, explaining to people exactly how you need to refer to her and people like her. Let's go ahead and play that.
Here's a handy dandy conjugation guide from a neopronouns conjugation guide at Tumblr. And so it's like, Faye is my friend. I saw Fair yesterday. This was Fair request. That book is Fair's. Faye loves Fair self. Hopefully that makes sense. I just wanted to give like a little guide and show you how to use them. Again, any hate, please leave at the door.
So, like the gentleman said, what they're really trying to do is they're not just letting you know about what their pronouns are and how they want you to refer to them. They're trying to control the way you think about them and the way you speak about them to others. They're trying to control your thoughts and your words. It has nothing to do with, oh, this is how I want to be referred to. This has to do with they want to control your thinking and your words and also your actions. And they're trying to do it in the name of compassion. And they will force you to show so-called compassion for these gender-confused individuals. They will punish you if you don't show the appropriate compassion. A recent news story about 16-year-old student Josh Alexander, St. Joseph's Catholic High School in Ontario, Canada. This boy was suspended for 20 days. It's a Catholic school. He was suspended for 20 days. Why? Because in debates and discussions, he insisted that there are only two biological sexes. I don't like using the word gender because it's a made-up word, and it has an agenda behind it. I don't like using that word. He essentially insisted, according to Catholic teaching, that there are only biological males and only biological females, and you can't switch between the two. He also argued that boys shouldn't be allowed into girls' bathrooms. Just a decade ago, even sooner than that, that wouldn't have been controversial. Well, he got suspended. He was punished by a Catholic school for insisting on two biological sexes only. He rightly hired attorneys to represent him. And do you know what they're filing the appeal over? Religious discrimination against his Catholic beliefs. Can you believe that? A Catholic student in a Catholic school is filing an appeal for religious discrimination against his Catholic beliefs at a Catholic school. How insane is that? How insane are things getting today? And then you've got this epidemic of subjecting children to sexually explicit drag shows. There was a massive uproar in December when it was revealed that a so-called family-friendly drag show was actually quite sexually explicit. So as a warning, I'm going to show a clip with about a minute. There are some sexually explicit scenes in here, so if you don't want to see this, or if you have children around, please don't show them. You can fast forward through the next minute. But let's take a look at this so-called family-friendly drag event in Texas.
Your kid out to a family-friendly drag show, ladies and gentlemen. Are you confused yet? Minty fresh. I had sex with my father's boss in my father's office. What's your favorite part? Well, I slept with my stepfather's co-worker in our RV over Thanksgiving.
Okay, if you're not outraged, there's something wrong with you. There's something wrong with you if you watch that and you're not outraged. First of all, it was a complete deception, total dishonesty for them to characterize this and promote it before the show aired as family friendly. So it deceived parents into thinking, oh, I can take my child to this because it's safe. First of all, they shouldn't have been taking their child to a drag show anyway, regardless of whether or not it's family or friendly. But still, they deceived parents into thinking this was a family-friendly show when it was clearly not. I mean, open discussion of their sexual escapades in front of children. And there was one scene, which I didn't show, because I did watch longer clips of this show, where you have the so-called, I don't want to use the word, but breasts in a box, and he actually shows them. He's wearing a thong, and at one point he turns around and bends over, and he actually removes the thong to the side so that he shows everything to the little children in the audience. It's outrageous. It's insane. These people need to be in prison. I mean, how is it that this sort of sexually explicit exposing of yourself to little children is allowed at a drag show, but anywhere else, you'd be thrown in prison for exposing yourself like that to a child? They would never allow this in any other venue. But for some reason, in a drag show, it's okay. For some reason, drag queens get a pass. We have to show compassion to the drag queens while withholding compassion to the children who are clearly being groomed, and as far as I'm concerned, abused. And then you've got the parents who take their children to these shows, and the parents who remained at this drag show once they started to realize, oh, this is actually explicit. People are simulating copulation, including homosexual copulation and multiple other sex acts. They're showing body parts. I mean, the entire thing was sexual. I mean, it was perverse. And the parents who remained there, I can't even understand people like that. I try to put myself in the shoes of other people. I really do. I try to be empathic. I try to understand where people are coming from when they come from a different point of view. I try not to demonize the other people, because I think that's an easy trap to fall into, is you just demonize the other people, and then you never really listen to what they're saying. You don't try to relate in any way in order to bring them to the truth. You just demonize. And I'm not interested in demonizing people. I'm trying to understand. But I honestly, as a parent myself, I cannot understand these parents who take their children to these shows and then remain there. They don't just walk out. They stay there. They allow their children to continue to see this to the very end. They allow their children to sit through, these tales of people's sexual exploits, adults talking about their sexual escapades with their secretary, with whoever. It's child abuse. And I think these parents belong either in prison or they need to have their children taken away. I just cannot understand. I can't comprehend parents like that. We'll be right back with the show, but I'd like to take a moment to encourage you to sign up for a premium subscription if you haven't already. It's only $10 a month, which is a really rock bottom price, and it gets you thousands of hours of content on everything across the board: theology, philosophy, apologetics, history, everything. We have things for little children. We have things for adults. While we give a lot of our content away for free, the work that we do here does not come for free. It costs us money. The $10 a month will go a long way in helping us to continue to produce top quality, faith-based content, all with a view towards spreading truth, ultimately for the salvation of souls. So if you want to support us, please consider signing up for premium at churchmilitant.com/go premium. That's churchmilitant.com/go premium. Thank you so much for your support. And then you have the problem of these drag queens, a number of them being shown to be convicted sex offenders. Now, some people say, they write it off as saying, those are just a few rare instances. It's not really as common as people claim. Well, actually, it is more common than you think. And the reason that you don't think it's very common is because the media blacks it out. Media doesn't want you to know about this because big media and big tech are on the side of the groomers. As we know, Twitter banned the use of the word groomer for a while, until Elon Musk took over, and then he unbanned the word. But for a long time, you couldn't even use the word groomer because they are protecting the marginalized, victimized class of drag queens. In their minds, they're the marginalized class, and we must show them compassion. And if you're a parent who's worried about the sexualization of your children, well, that's just too bad. You keep your mouth shut, you don't talk about it because you're just victimizing these poor marginalized individuals who just need to indulge in their fantasies of putting on makeup and a wig and wearing women's clothing and prancing around, in sexually explicit ways. They're the victims here, not you parents, and certainly not the children who are being exploited, and exposed to this and groomed and psychologically messed up because of what they're seeing at a young age. They're not the victims. The drag queens are. So don't you dare call them out on anything, because you're just re-victimizing them. Well, let's take a look at some of these so-called victims. You've got Alberto Alfonso Garza. Back in 2019, he was exposed as being a convicted pedophile. And the problem is, under the stage name Tatiana Malanina, he was allowed to read to children as young as age 2 in the Houston Public Library. They never did a criminal background check. Why? Because he puts on a wig and makeup and a dress, and he's given a free pass, just like all of them are. All you have to do is call yourself a drag queen, and you're given a free pass to do whatever the hell you want. And so he was having access to 2-year-old children, free access. And it turns out he was convicted in 2008 for sexually assaulting an 8-year-old boy. 8-year-old boy. He sexually assaulted, probably ruined that little boy's life. Convicted, registered sex offender, and yet here he is, free access to children. Who knows what else he might have done? Now, the Houston Public Library had to apologize. They claimed ignorance. They claimed, we didn't know. Well, you didn't do a criminal background check. That's why. Well, it turns out there was a second convicted sex offender, even worse than this one, that was allowed to read at the Houston Public Library. His name was William Travis Dees, also known as Lisa Lott, his drag name. Allowed free access to children. During Drag Queen Story Hour, it turns out that he was convicted in 2004 of sexually assaulting 4 underage children. When I say underage, I mean ages 4, 5, 6, and 8. 4 children registered as a high-risk sex offender, but given a free pass at the library. Again, because they just don't run these criminal background checks, they don't think they need to for drag queens. And then you have David Lee Richardson, who goes under the stage name Miss Kitty Litter. Richardson was convicted of male prostitution in 1996, and yet allowed to read to children at Drag Queen Story Hour. And when this news came out of his prior conviction, do you know that a bunch of people on the left didn't care? They thought, oh, well, no, not a big deal. He should be allowed to read around children. He's safe. Really, a male prostitute. Put on a little makeup, a wig, a dress, given a free pass. This is a more recent story. You've got Kelsey Metaborin. This is a woman. Kelsey Metaborin, she's a drag mom who helped train up a child drag queen. I'm talking about a young underage boy who likes to dress up and dance around and pose around in sexually explicit ways. Boys don't do this unless they're groomed to do this, unless they've been exposed to this. In some cases, sexually abused. And then they sexualize their actions at far too young of an age. Well, it turns out his drag mom was arrested and charged with distribution of child porn just last fall. She's also an elementary school teacher in Veneta, Oregon. So an elementary school teacher and a drag mom who helped train up a young boy to be a drag queen, caught with child porn. Now let's move over to the UK, Brighton. You've got Robert Clothier, also known as Lady James. Longtime fixture of the drag scene over there. He was caught and arrested and convicted for arranging to have sex with a man and his 2 underage children, aged 8 and 11. This drag queen actually bought underwear for his daughter. And he was nabbed, and he was sentenced to 26 months in prison, which, as far as I'm concerned, is a slap on the wrist for somebody like this. You've got Milwaukee judge Brett Blom, a huge promoter of Drag Queen Story Hours, a big pro-LGBT advocate. He headed an LGBT group that heavily promoted Drag Queen Story Hours. He was arrested and charged in 2021 for possession of child porn, multiple images of child porn. He was a judge. And then this incident took place at St. John's Library in Portland, Oregon, involving a man named Anthony Hudson, also known as Carla Rossi. He was doing Drag Queen Story Hour, and after one session, he decided to roll around on the floor and invite the other children to crawl all over him. You can see the pictures. They're crawling all over him, hugging him, some are straddling him, and he's just taking it all in. He loves it. He's loving it. Now, let me ask you, if he were not a drag queen, if he were just a guy, okay, in a t-shirt, jeans, reading stories to children, then afterwards invited all of them to, hey, let's roll around on the floor and you guys can crawl all over me. You can rub my chest and crawl all over my groin. Would any library allow that? Would any parent allow that? Of course not. Absolutely not. No one's going to let their child crawl all over a grown man who's a stranger on the floor. Nobody would do that. But again, you put on a wig and makeup and wear a dress. You call yourself a drag queen and you're given a free pass because they're the marginalized class. They're the victims here. So you have to indulge their fantasies. It's complete and total garbage. And people need to start waking up to this. Here, we've got a clip here now. It's making its way into churches now. Now, granted, this is a fake church, and this guy's a fake pastor. He's not an actual pastor. I believe he's an atheist. But you have this clip of this so-called pastor taking 2 young girls to the stage there, the so-called sanctuary, and grooming them right in front of the entire congregation and blaspheming God. Listen to what he has to say.
Well, one of the things I think is great about Miss Pentecost is she reminds us that we follow a God who calls us to not conform to things of this world, that we're supposed to be transformed by the renewal of our minds. And that means that what I think today may have to change tomorrow if I continue to renew my mind. And it's so cool that we serve a God that calls us to continue to grow and continue to change into something new, and to not be bound by the ways that the world confines us sometimes, that we're supposed to live differently.
I mean, you almost can't play that because it's so blasphemous. God calls us to change our ways. God calls us not to conform with the ways of the world's thinking. Are you kidding? That's what you're doing. You're asking us to conform to the ways of the world by accepting this perversion, by accepting this inversion of the truth. You know, there's a scripture verse. It's 1 Corinthians 14:33, and it says, "For God is not a God of confusion, but of peace." God is not a God of confusion, but of peace. Satan is the exact opposite. Satan is the author of confusion, and he is the author of turmoil. Everything God wants to do, Satan wants to undo. He wants to do the opposite of and invert. So black is white. Evil is good. Up is down. All you have to do is, for instance, look at a black mass. A black mass is a total mockery and, in a sense, an inversion of the holy sacrifice of the mass. You've got the inverted crucifix. You've got the desecration of the Eucharist rather than the consecration and then the worship, and Holy Communion. It's consecration and then desecration of the Holy Eucharist in the worst ways imaginable that I can't even mention on air. Satan is trying to subvert the natural order, and he's implementing his plans to a remarkable degree. Why? Because we are letting him. We are just letting him. And we're not fighting back, not enough. Parents, you need to fight back. You can't be meek little lambs in the face of this slaughter, and it's spiritual slaughter. It's psychological slaughter. Children everywhere are being corrupted, and we as parents, we must fight back. And it's clear that, some parents' actions are having a good effect. For instance, during the midterms, multiple liberal school district boards were flipped to conservative. Why? Because parents were sick of it. They were sick of the grooming in the schools, the pornographic material, the filth, and they decided, I've got to run for a seat on the school board. I've got to have my own input so that I can make decisions to get this filth out of our schools. Many of you have probably seen clips of outraged parents at these school board meetings reading some of the pornographic filth that our children are being exposed to. And that has been that's had a great impact on parents around the nation. And one thing, too, is that the vast majority of parents don't want this. They do not want this. They're not on the side of this. And this is not a Republican, Democrat, liberal, conservative thing. Any sane adult does not want children exposed to sexually explicit material, whether it's at a drag queen, a drag show or drag queen story hour, in the public library or in public schools. Sane individuals want to protect children. Insane, corrupt individuals don't care. If you're one of those individuals out there who really doesn't see a big deal about exposing kids to this sort of thing, there's something wrong with you. There's something very wrong with you. You were probably groomed at a young age. Maybe you were even sexually abused, and it's messed you up psychologically such that you just don't see a problem with this because maybe it happened to you. Well, it's a massive problem. It's a crime as far as I'm concerned. It is child abuse. And we've got to fight back, parents. You can't be, like I said, you can't just roll over and stay quiet in the name of some misguided compassion while your children and other people's children are being corrupted and their lives and souls destroyed. Because that is what's happening here. Don't try to dismiss it as not a big deal. It's a very big deal. And all you have to do is look at the proliferation of all the drag queen shows, and you've got the child drag queen documentaries coming out in the mainstream media promoting child drag queens as if it's a great and wonderful thing. All you have to do is look at that and see that the world is being overrun by this. I mean, the corruption is moving at an alarming pace. And why? It's because we are sitting back and not doing enough. There is a slogan that I sort of live by. And sometimes it's attributed to St. Augustine, sometimes it's attributed to St. Ignatius. But it goes like this: pray as if everything depends on God, work as if everything depends on you. And I think that's a great slogan to live by. Pray your heart out. Understand that there's nothing that you can accomplish without the grace of God. Everything that you do can only be done successfully with the grace, with the help of God. And that starts with prayer. You must pray. Prayer must undergird everything that you do. If you take on any venture at all and you don't first turn to God and ask for his help and his blessing, just expect the venture to fail. Just pretty much expect it. It's foolish. You turn to God first in all things. And then you act. Ora et labora. That's the slogan of the Benedictines. Pray and work. It's both together, not mutually exclusive, one or the other only. It's both together. You're not called to be quietists, where you're just sort of passive. And you have this attitude of, I'll pray about it. I'll pray, and I'll just sort of let God work it all out. Well, how do you expect God to work it all out? He's working it all out through people like you, who are taking action. You're getting out there. You're making your voice heard. You're objecting to this evil and this filth. You're taking that action. That's how God is sorting it all out. It's through you. I mean, it's just ridiculous to think, let me pray, and then I just hope that it all just sort of goes away. God will deal with it. He deals with it through humans, through human action, through human agency. That's how he deals with things in the world. Now, sometimes he will, intervene in some miraculous event, some supernatural event that's beyond, human capability. But that's not his normal way of operating. The normal way of operating is he has brought you into this world. He's given you life for a purpose. And that purpose is to glorify him and do his will on earth. And part of doing his will is to advance the kingdom of God on earth. And what is part of advancing the kingdom of God? It is fighting the culture wars. It is. It's fighting to promote good laws that foster the true, the good, and the beautiful, that protect life, that nurture life, that protect children, and foster innocence and purity and goodness. And you are a part of all that. Pray that God will reveal his will to you, and then ask him, what do I do? How do you want me to help change things around? And then you just look at your circumstances. What circumstances are open to you? What can you do? And that necessarily entails giving some things up. If you like sitting around watching a lot of soap operas, if you like, spending loads of time on social media, just sort of chatting with people or doing whatever, or playing video games, maybe give some of that up. And see what you can do out there to make a difference, to help implement change. Because the world is drowning in evil. And we can't afford people to be sitting on the sidelines. The world is drowning in filth. And you can't just be some passive viewer of all this. You need to be part of the fight, part of the battle. You need to get out there and you need to fight with the tools and the instruments that God has given you and the avenues he's opened up for you to do. Pray as if everything depended on God. Work as if everything depended on you. Thanks for listening. In the words of St. Joan of Arc, in God's name, forward boldly.